All aboard the lazy welcome to part two. We can't do the full one again, but welcome everyone back to part two. We're going to continue the second round of the draft. I kind of like the little intermissions, John. I know obviously this is just a lazy, don't want to buy the full version of Zoom out of my end, but it adds for a nice little touch in the middle.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah, I guess I have to give you the compliment here. Yeah, it helps us digest things a little bit, take a break, forward look to the second round here. But I still have to call you out for being cheap with all the with your salary over there. You'd think you could spring for the full Zoom, whatever the platinum version is.
Look, the full dad life, you have to make some sacrifices elsewhere.
You know,
You
put
have
the
to
commish,
cancel.
put the commish fund towards Theo's college fund instead.
Yeah, it just is what it is. But honestly, I think if we start doing these more frequently, it would definitely be worth it. It's just been so infrequent, and like I'd love to do it more. So hopefully we can do that, and then we can get back on the paid Zoom account. But until then, we charge forward. Um, so I think you're up here with Jimmy at 109. A little bit of history on this pick. It was traded along with Isaiah Pacheco for Brandon Cooks by yours truly. Um, it's paying a couple years later as it was paying a month after that. So mistakes were made, but nevertheless, Jimmy is on the clock. Um, did I actually record, John? Oh no, I am. Oh, unbelievable. Look at the old I was like,
Oh man,
did I
he's so
record?
rusty, so
Yeah,
rusty.
no, we are very rusty, but I am extremely glad we are recording. Anyway, Jimmy's on the board, 109. It's kind of a tough spot. I mean, I'll take you through just generally looking at my board. I still have a couple players in the mid first. I have Ricky Pearsall, Lad McConkey, Brock Bowers, and then just below them in the late first here, I have Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and Xavier Worthy. So there are some options, but he's definitely in a bit of a like you could argue he's at towards the start of a tier, which is a tough place to be.
Yep, for sure. Coming into this pod, this was probably the pick I was the least confident in. So I guess in terms of full disclosure, I don't really have a formal big board this year, but in terms of if I were Jimmy here, I think you can go in pretty much any direction. Like I would say he's still the favorite, two-time reigning champ. I know Ben's gonna kill me for saying that. But obviously a good roster. Um, three quarterbacks deep, two top end running backs, a lot of good receivers. It's tough. Yeah, I think Bowers is kind of a one of one at that position or this year, but he does have Trey McBride in place. So I don't know if that's really the direction I would go if I were Jimmy. I think you didn't mention them. I think this is where you can start to consider running back like Jonathan Brooks. I know he's coming off the injury. It's an ACL, right?
ACL, yeah.
ACL. So coming off the injury. So who knows if he or how they kind of ease him in Carolina there, but I think him and Benson, I feel pretty good about in terms of, you know, at least this season to some degree. I know Connor's still there with the Cardinals, so Benson's probably splitting, but they took him early. Both are pretty highly touted as prospects, so I think you can consider those guys. Jimmy has, again, he has CMC, he has Saquon. After that, things get at least a little dicey in terms of running back depth. So maybe again, if I want to get another body in the room, someone I could potentially start in a flex position. But ultimately for Dynasty, I think I'm just going best player available. I like the receivers, like you said, Pearsall, Lad. I'm a little lower on Worthy. Um, I don't know. I think KC, they're starting to remind me of the Pats a little bit, where they're just kind of spreading the ball around. They don't really care about having an alpha receiver. They just want to
Yeah.
platoon it. And just in terms of prospect, I wasn't the biggest Worthy guy even before the KC landing spot. So I think if I were in this spot, I would be out on Worthy versus kind of his projected ADP. So for Jimmy here, I think I'm going to lock in Pearsall with the 109. Another, I feel like
Oh,
I'm
oh,
betraying myself here, going with the Matt Harmon special here with Odunze for Tam and Pearsall for Jimmy here.
got a
But
little
I don't
Matt
know,
Harmon.
right? They spent a first round pick on him. He's going to San Francisco, who we know is an elite offense year after year. They just signed today Jawan Jennings to a 2-year deal for, okay money at least. So I
Yeah.
think they're projecting that right, there have been rumblings that they're shopping Ayuk and or Debo all off season. I feel like they're going to deal one of them. I would guess Debo. So I think sooner rather than later, Pearsall is going to slot into the receiver two position with the 49ers. And as a prospect, I like him. So yeah, if I'm Jimmy here, I'm going with Pearsall at the 109.
That's what I would do too. I have Pearsall as the next receiver after Brian Thomas Jr. And I don't know. I just feel like the same thing as you. Like he was drafted in the first round. He lands in a good spot. I don't know. I think they're gonna extend Ayuk personally, but either way, it's either Debo or Ayuk's gonna be gone before next season. So it's a bit of a long-term play, but Pearsall just gets open all across the route tree. He's such a good player. It's hard to pass him up. I think he's more well-rounded than a Lad McConkey, who is more of like a flanker, just like absolutely cannot beat press coverage and play X. So yeah, I do like Ricky Pearsall better, and I
There's
do
so
like
much
him here at the
separation.
109. So much separation. That's what I'm all about. Well, John, I'm gonna do the most meme Brando move. Brock Bowers' fall has gone way too far. At some point, you just need to take talent. I know John I just traded for Jake Ferguson, but at the same time, you have a chance to draft Brock Bowers, who could be a true difference maker. Um, at some point in Dynasty, you draft talent and situation will change around it. So I am going to lock in the Brock Bowers selection here at 10, a player who in the early going was mocked much earlier, maybe 106, 107 type area, sometimes even earlier. I think you just know you're getting a really good football player who's more than a tight end. He's just a really good pass catcher, great after the catch. You take the gamble here and just see what happens.
Yep, agreed. I don't think a team is spending a top 15 pick on a tight end to, not use them in the receiving game pretty significantly. And then just in terms of, I guess, the bigger picture strategy here, this if I were John, I would probably try and do this and kind of play chicken with Bowers. Like you said, he just traded for Ferguson, who, I feel pretty good about. I still want to chase that real upside at the position. And while I would, certainly lean the quarterbacks in the early part of the draft and mid part of the first year, like we laid out in this mock, I still think I would be chasing a high end tight end, and I would make the bet that Tam, who has Hawkinson, um, Jimmy, who has McBride, and then Mark at 107, who, well, he doesn't, he has what, Evan Ingram, and who's a nice player, but he doesn't really have a high end tight end. I think Mark just has other holes that are more important to fill. I think I'd be making this bet and hoping that Bowers falls to me at 110, even if they, Travers and or John I have the tight ends don't matter type of mentality. I think, like you said, this is too good of a value to pass up at 110 here.
I will say this is 100% what I would have done if I sat at 110 and the board fell this way, even with Mark Andrews. And if I still had Jake Ferguson, I would have picked Brock Bowers. I would have felt that way. So, you know me, I love the tight ends. I feel like there's a market inefficiency in our league where these guys are still good flex players that it's not considered. So I would take them. And if you're John I, you got potentially a generational quarterback, generational receiver, and I mean, go back to like early fall. These were the top three guys everyone was talking about: Williams, Harrison, and Bowers. So he that's a nice little haul there, and remakes his quarterback room with Drake May and Jaden Daniels. So I like what he's done there. We finally get to the second round. John Canellis is sitting there at 201. We're probably going to go a little bit faster to make sure we get this all in part two. But I do want to say one thing, and what's interesting to me is with John Canellis's rebuild, he's been rebuilding for about 2 years now. He didn't have a first round pick last year, and he doesn't have a first round pick this year. Now he has the 201, and he got Pat Mahomes, which I would have done that trade. I just think it's an interesting high level observation that a rebuilding team has been mostly selecting in the second round, and it it can definitely work. We've had some hits in the second round, but I just feel like there is a even in a deep class, I think you're lowering your hit rate quite a bit when you're drafting in the second versus the first.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, at least in the early second, you can say it's equivalent to a late first, but regardless, yeah, I think with I don't know. For me, I think you're targeting the lotto players. I feel like the hit rate there is pretty good. We're seeing a number of guys who project to be high end skill position or
Yeah.
quarterback starters moving forward versus, I would say, starting, around 105 or the middle of the first and continuing into the second. Those guys, it's really more of a crapshoot.
Yeah. No, I feel the same exact way. Well, what are you doing here at 201, John? Where are you leaning?
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, we can pick up the pace a little bit here. So if I'm John, I feel good about my quarterbacks. Mahomes and Love is 1, 2. Levis is, I think, an interesting 3. I know he's pretty divisive as a prospect, but they really built things up around him this year, so he should have a fair shake. I guess I'll just get right to it. If I'm John, I'm locking in Lad McConkey here. He's my next receiver on the board. I feel like I'm not a strong competitor this coming year, so I'm kind of forward looking a little bit. I want to get those real kind of pillar positions in place. I already have the quarterbacks. I guess kind of a similar story to Tam and Mark. I feel like Lad obviously doesn't, I don't think, have the same upside as the top 3 receivers in this class, but I'm still looking to get some receivers in place who I hope can at least be good flexes for me you know, with the absolute kind of ceiling outcome. You hope for more.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I Lad is was my 11th player. This is my top 11. So in some way, shape, or form, I would end up going Lad there too. So I totally agree with you. This is interesting. Alex at the 202.
The wild
Um,
card.
because you don't know what Alex is thinking half the time. But you look at it, and I'm looking at my board. The mid first is gone. I have in a pretty clear tier. Personally, I don't. Personally, I can't stand this running back class. I would have liked Jonathan Brooks. I'm steering away from an ACL, so I'm not even looking at that direction on my board personally yet until the next two quarterbacks and Xavier Worthy are off the board. So that's where I'm looking. Bo Nix, Michael Penix, or Xavier Worthy. Um, I've said my piece on Penix on the board. He's still the eighth overall pick. He's going to get a chance at some point. You never know when that's going to be, but we now have a 6 quarterback limit, so that has some value too. But I can't draft him over Bo Nix because I feel like Bo Nix has a chance to start as a rookie, and still has really good draft capital with the 12th overall pick. So I'm deciding really between Bo Nix and Xavier Worthy if I'm Alex. His quarterbacks, he's got Tua and Purdy. You feel pretty good about that. Maybe not a lead upside, but you feel pretty solid. Sam Howell's worthless at this point. And then Deshaun Watson may as well be worthless. I would never want that guy on my team. Um, but he's still gonna start. So you feel pretty good if you're Alex with at least 3 starters. You don't have to go quarterback, and he definitely has a need at wide receiver overall. I do worry that Xavier Worthy is going to be more of like a hit or miss type guy, but you look at that receiver room in Kansas City, and he was a first round pick. Rashee Rice might miss half the season. I don't think Hollywood's anything more than like a guy in the room, to be honest, at this point in his career. So I'm not worried about that. I'm going to take the shot that Xavier Worthy ends up popping with Mahomes at this pick. I'm gonna figure out quarterback 3 somewhere else if I'm Alex and just take a shot on a first round receiver with a great quarterback. That's what the second round becomes, John. I mean, like there are holes in every one of these guys, I feel like. And that's why I don't like the hit rate in round 2. Although there are interesting guys, yes, I don't love like the hit rates necessarily here because I feel like I could have just ended up with MBS at the 202 here, and that could just be what I'm gonna get.
Yep, no, I'm with you. It is tough. If this were me, I would personally go in a different direction. I think I said my piece on Worthy. I'm not the highest on him, but you can definitely see the upside. It's obviously a sexy landing spot, and there's certainly room for someone like you said to kind of emerge as Mahomes' receiver 1, since there's pretty big vacuum for that position right now.
So we got Will Tam here at the third pick. You're up on the clock to decide for him. Tam has already selected Roma Dunze and Brian Thomas in this draft. So he's really
Yep.
rebuilt the receiver room.
So I think here I'm looking at similar guys that you mentioned. Bo Nix being principally among them. I'm also looking at running back here, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. Bo Nix versus I would say Jonathan Brooks as the RB1 for this class. I think him versus Benson, you can have a you know an argument. Um, is tough. I think if I'm Tam, I addressed, I hope, high end receiver with my first two picks. I have Brees in place as an RB1. I'm going to go Jonathan Brooks here. I think after Brees for this year, I know Zamir White is the starter with the Vegas Raiders, but I don't know. He was what was he, a fourth round pick? I feel like they're not super invested in him. He feels kind of like a placeholder. I know some people are saying, or I shouldn't disparage too much, but maybe he's like this year's Madison, where he's just kind of a,
Mhm.
meh guy who's getting projected high just based on volume. I think here I'm willing to take a shot on the potential running back one, a guy who take the pot shot at Ben here. He really doesn't have much competition with like the corpse of Miles Sanders there. I know Chuba's there. He looked okay, but I think they took Brooks pretty early, spent some draft capital there, and it sounds like they want to pound the rock after kind of the beating Bryce took last year. So this is a spot I feel comfortable taking Brooks.
I like it at this point. It's not next on my board. I have trouble with the ACL, but I do understand Carolina, and Jonathan Brooks is probably the one talent guy that I would have considered. And if you're Will Tam, you can't ignore running back anymore. Like the elephant in the room, it's been 3 seasons. He hasn't made the playoffs. Like he's got to start pushing some chips in and building a running back room and starting to fill out the roster as best he can. Cause if it's not this year, it's gotta be next year if you're him. So I like that selection. I'm sitting here with Mark. We have Malik Neighbors, JJ McCarthy were his first round selections. I think the world is his oyster. I don't think I keep saying it. I'm sorry, Mark. But what my favorite thing about Mark, and this is going on YouTube, it's going to be out there forever. I feel like you can't insult Mark. Like he's just like, you feel that way, that's fine. Like he's not going to be insulted the fact that I don't think his team's really a playoff contender and he'll totally be okay with that. So, anyway, that was just my little sidebar. So if I'm Mark, I'm taking best available. He still needs a quarterback too. I mean, because JJ McCarthy's quarterback too. If I'm him and Bo Nix is sitting there, 12th overall pick, Sean Payton, I think he's a I'm not gonna say a high floor, but like he's got somewhat of a floor with a short passing game in his repertoire. So I'm pretty psyched if I'm marked that with the 204, I can snag Bo Nix here. And that's what I'm gonna set in.
I like
Now
the
you
pick.
now you have Nix and McCarthy, two guys drafted the 10th overall pick, the 12th overall pick, and you have that behind Justin Herbert. I think you potentially have a quarterback room to move forward with if you're Mark, as well as that elite receiver there at 104.
Yeah, Brandon, let's do this exercise. I was thinking about this before the draft. So going back to our first rookie draft, which is 2022, Kenny Pickett was what, the 20th overall pick. He went like
Yeah.
108 in that draft. If you're getting a Bo Nix who's going 12th overall, mid second, that's a home run value in my opinion.
This is why I love these first 14 picks here. And like I personally would not go Jonathan Brooks before Penix, but I get it. And when you have this many quarterbacks drafted that early, it really makes the draft deeper than usual. So I do like that a lot. John Cadell is on the board at 205. I'm not on the clock, but I'm itching to draft Michael Penix for someone. But you're up right now, John. What would you do with John's room here? He picked Lad McConkey at the 201.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to have the Penix discussion. I think we differ here where I agree he's a top 10 overall pick in the NFL draft. There's value there. I don't know. If we're going to make the Jordan Love comparison, I feel like he's not that level of prospect. He's going to be sitting for at least 2 years probably in Atlanta. So you have to factor kind of the opportunity cost into the equation here. I wasn't huge on him coming out just in terms of the talent. So like a lot of people, I think he was overdrafted quite a bit. So I know, right, he's obviously going to get a shot there at some point, so that's valuable. If I'm John, I'm hammering receiver here. I think he has a need there. Like if you scroll down, let me find his team here. He has a lot of, I think, flex kind of worthy players: Godwin, Hollywood Brown, Deontay Johnson. But again, and who knows how these second round receivers pan out. But I think there's at least a shot some of them could emerge as, maybe a receiver two type if they hit their ceiling. So I think there's value there. If I'm John, I'll go kind of another divisive prospect, Keon Coleman. So I
Okay.
know possibly this year's QJ, right? Team no separation with this one. But I don't know, freak athlete lands with Buffalo when they have a clear opening at the receiver position. So there's certainly opportunity there. And then, obviously his kind of trump card is he's a big ball winner, can really be that contested catch guy for you. So I think he's going into an opportunity where he'll have a good chance to develop and hopefully, work on the route tree a little bit, develop some of those other skills that he may have been lacking in college.
I like it. So it's interesting, John, as I'm sitting here at 206, because I'm going to take team into consideration and I'm going to do something that if I were at the pick, I would go Michael Penix because you look at Jimmy's roster, he has Hurts, Burrow, and Goff. So he's very, very secure at quarterback, probably the best, the most secure of any team at 1, 2, 3 in quarterback in the league. But adding a guy like Penix with that roster, he doesn't need Penix for years. He can wait out the 2 years on Kirk Cousins and all of a sudden have a starter just waiting in his wings for the mere price of 206. That's probably what I would do if I were in the spot. And I'm going to betray the draft only slightly a little bit, only because Trey Benson's sitting there and he's the James Conner owner, and he's in a competing year. And I think Team Snare is going to override that. If I'm Jimmy, the window is now. If Connor goes down, you have Benson. You lock up that Arizona backfield, and you're going for title number 3, making Ben's life a misery. So I'm going to go Trey Benson and Jimmy laughs all the way from Dallas.
I like it. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think in terms of team fit, Jimmy probably would be the ideal spot for Penix for the reasons you laid out. But yep, no, I also like pushing chips in to go for the three-peat here, so can't argue with that. And I would say, I know kind of coming in, I feel like people viewed Corum at least pretty close to these guys in terms of tier. I know he's slotting in behind Kyra now, who, some people are dinging for this foot injury. We'll see how that shakes out. But based on that, I think where things currently stand in the NFL draft, this is kind of the top tier of running backs with Brooks and Benson. So I like that pick a lot. I think so. I know I kind of disparaged Penix a few picks ago, but at this point, I think the value is too much to pass up. So I'm just going to be quick here and mark it in for Tam. I think he could be looking at receiver as well, even though he already took Odunze and Thomas. But I think, yeah, for a later second round pick, getting a top 10 quarterback in the NFL draft is smash value.
Yep, and that takes my last guy out of that tier. So I agree. It's just like you take him if you're Tam. Maybe Penix is starting by the time Russell Wilson's irrelevant for all we know. So I do like that a lot. Wow, we have John Ianello's back on the board. It feels like wow, he felt like me for like 6 picks. He had nothing, but he's back up. He's taken, I mean, I don't even know if we can recap this, but Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and Brock Bowers. The world is his oyster. It's got to be talent at this point. Um, Running back, I have a teardrop before Blake Corum and Marshawn Lloyd. I think both of them are worthy of a second round pick, but you also have some receivers now: Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk, Jermaine Burton. I do think Burton, like, he's super talented, and like Matt Harmon said, in terms of like pure In terms of pure separation, he was his fourth guy in the class. So he's interesting at some point, but he is a complete headache and head case. So you are sort of weighing that, when can you punt on a pick? Maybe maybe it's worth it at this point, for Travers and John I don't know why I defaulted to Travers here, but I think if I'm him, I'm taking the chance on Adonai Mitchell, a guy who I feel like the negatives on him have gotten way overblown and were way overblown by the NFL too. And there was a quote from Ben in my text chain that said he can't wait to laugh when Adonai Mitchell is selected. And
Wow.
I replied to him and I said, Ben, like, the problem is I would have agreed with you if he went in the first round, but like after his draft capital, like he's probably going mid to late second in our league. And at that point, just take a chance on a guy who has X traits and profiles similarly to a George Pickens coming into the league. So I think it's a great shout out at this point. And I don't, is it crazy to say in 2 or 3 years we might look back and he could be the best Colts receiver? I don't think it's crazy. I'm sorry. I like Michael Pittman a lot too, but I don't think Pittman's a 1A. And I think Adonai Mitchell potentially could carve out that role. Yeah, I don't think it's completely out of the question. That's all I'm saying. I like it
Yeah,
here in the
no, I mean,
two
that's
A.
tough. I like Pittman a lot. I will say Ben can laugh at me. I like Mitchell over Worthy. I mean, at some point I have to be a slave to the scoreboard, and with the draft capital and the Chiefs are a good landing spot for Worthy. I think there's some differentiation in terms of fantasy at this point. But I like AD Mitchell a lot. If he did get better draft capital, I would probably bump him up to like an early second. At this point, I think it's a good value. I think the talent's there. He's going to be a red zone threat. We'll see what else he can do on top of that. But I think he should slide in. I mean, I guess they still have Jesus Christ, I'm blanking on his name, slot receiver Josh Downs from last year. So maybe they'll spread things around a little bit. But I like AD Mitchell more than him and think he can emerge as the receiver too in the short term. And yeah, like you said, who knows in the long term?
Yeah, and I'm not putting. I would obviously bet on Michael Pittman. I don't want that to become a bit or anything, but I don't think it's a for sure thing that Pittman's going to continue to be the target. The
Oh man, I'm surprised this is coming out of your mouth as the Harmon support. I feel like we owe Harmon royalties at this point for
hey,
the amount of free publicity.
Harmon likes Josh Downs and Adonai Mitchell too. Now, look, I don't. John Canellis is going to owe you a little bit after making all his selections here in the second. He's sitting here at 209. Where are you looking, John? I mean, we have two more picks we're going to take in this mock. There's still interesting guys. I mean, we named a few of them: Leggett, Jalen Polk, Jermaine Burton, Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd. Those are really the next guys on my board. But it is thinning out. It is thinning out, and we can touch on that after we get down with the second round.
Yeah, so if I'm John, I think I'm gonna, based on who's gone before me here, I think I'm gonna keep hammering receiver. I think, yeah, you could argue Corum, but I think there's kind of a tier break after Benson for quarterback after Penix. Tight end, I'm probably not really considering until later in the draft. Yeah, I was looking at probably the same guys as you with either AD Mitchell, Xavier Leggett. I think Burton is interesting too. T. Higgins obviously has the contract dispute going on, so who knows, like, if he gets dealt at some point. This is a tough also in terms of team fit. I'll lock it in, Xavier Leggett. So I know John might kill me since he already has Mingo and now Deontay Johnson. So this is a lot to invest in what last year was like a god awful offense. But I mean, this is a guy who got first round receiver draft capital. I know he was a late breakout, but he at least, had a really good final season in college before the NFL draft. So I think, and I don't know, I like Deontay Johnson. I know he's a Harmon guy, gets a lot of separation. He has been in the league a while at this point. So do we really project him to be like an alpha receiver for a team? I'm not so sure. So I think there's an interesting uh, opportunity for Leggett here with the draft capital, with the receiving room that's pretty open, with an aging Adam Thielen. So like, I would say Deontay is the only other real competition for targets there. Let's lock in Xavier Leggett, and John gets three dart throws at receiver in the second round here.
Yeah, go ahead and draft a Mingo 2.0. That'll
Oh,
just work. That'll work out just fine. Honestly, all jokes aside, I mean, if there's one, I defer to Harmon. Number one, my second rule is always defer to draft capital. He's a first round pick at the receiver position at this point. That is a great selection at that point. I personally don't love the prospect just because he's not another guy who's not great against press coverage. He's good against zone, following, Matt Harmon's work on reception perception. So, like, maybe you hope he can work on crossers and all that in the play action game, but it's so tough. Like, how many of those guys, and don't give me the Debo Samuel comp because Debo Samuel is one on one. Like, how many of those guys end up being a high volume guy in the league? So, um, that's why I don't love Leggett that much, but at the 209, I totally understand it and it's well worth it. I'm here at 210. Then I have one guy left in my early second on my board. It's Jalen Polk. I do like, I know people can say whatever they want about the Patriots. I like Jalen Polk, but I just feel like the upside of like a Jermaine Burton is so good. Like, he is a complete head case, but he's with Joe Burrow. Is it worth it for Mark to just take an absolute big swing for the fences? And then I feel like Blake Corum needs to be mentioned. Yes, I do lean Kyron Williams, and I'm biased as acknowledging the bias as the Kyron Williams owner, but Kyron hasn't exactly stayed healthy, and Sean McVay tends to run one guy a lot. So if Kyron gets hurt, I think Corum has a lot of value. Um, but looking where Mark is, and I don't think, by the way, Pro Football Doc actually released uh sort of a after the draft released a little blurb on Corum on his website and said that he's not worried about the rookie contract, but he is worried long term with the knee injury that Blake Corum suffered 2 years ago now. So, like, maybe could be a Sony Michelle situation where it's kind of rookie contract and tough after that. Tajay Spears no ACL situation, who knows? Um, Considering all of that, I'm gonna follow my board. I'm gonna go Jalen Polk. I would have taken the Jermaine, bro. The thing is, people will say Adonai Mitchell is a character concern. Jermaine Burton is a legitimate character concern, and like never play it down in the NFL for all we know. Like, it's that bad with him. So even though he has the talent, I'm gonna take a good player in Jalen Polk, who I think is gonna be productive in New England, grow up with Drake May and be a guy who can put up some stats for you. So I'm gonna lean that route with Mark and not go with the home run hit. But I gotta say, John, we just finished 2 rounds, still having guys like Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd, and Burton on the board. That's pretty nice. That's pretty nice going into the third round. Um,
it definitely feels like a stronger class compared to last year. I am going to have to ding you here for this last pick. You know, I love the head cases. I'm going Burton here myself, but no,
okay.
I think Bolt's going to be a rock solid player for the Pats.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. And like, do you just go upside at the 210 anyway? I was really torn. I don't, honestly, if this were my pick, I would have a tough time and I would need to think this through. Luckily, I don't have anything to offer anyone that I'm willing to give up, so I don't have to think this through. But yeah, it's a
Yep, the
tough one
stress
for
free
Mark.
time for us this year.
Just very stress free. I do want to say though, because there's a lot of teams. I know Tam has 8 picks, maybe. You have John I with 9 picks. And the general feeling around the league is people have vice grips on the third and fourth round picks this year. I don't get it, John. I really don't. Like, there are some guys I like here. I like Corum, Lloyd, and Burton. Like, they're very well worth the early third round picks. After that, dude, I don't know who's gonna be a productive fan. Like, guys like Javon Baker. He was a fourth round pick. Troy Franklin, fourth round pick. Malachi Corley, please. Like, I'm not interested. Like, I don't think this draft is as deep as people are saying it is. And as I've heard certain owners in the league have expressed how deep they think this draft is. I do agree in the first I think there's a deep like the first 6 picks are great. I think you have a lot of options in round 2. I think after the first few picks of round 3, you're gonna be sort of taking the same sort of dart throws that we make every year. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna call it out. I think this is the Puka effect. People saw what happened with Puka Nakua, and now all of a sudden you have beer goggles on in the 4th round this year. I look you look at the 3rd rounds from the first 2 drafts. I think it's gonna be somewhat similar when we get to the end and we look back at this draft too.
Yeah, you beat me to it, but I was going to say I think after Puka last year, everyone's getting pretty excited about these late round picks, thinking there's going to be one of those every year. And last year, you could argue there were two. Like Tank Dell wasn't as productive as Puka, having a breaking every rookie receiving record there is, but he had a receiver two type of season when healthy. And again, I'm probably a little lower on him than some this year, but you still can't argue the scoreboard from his rookie year, and he's in an elite offense. So there were a couple who ended up being what would be equivalent to 4th round picks this year who look like they really hit. So I think people are kind of carrying that mindset into this year, plus what appears to be a deep rookie class, and really having a lot of optimism about these late round picks and their ability to draft the right guys. But ultimately, you're right. The hit rate on the 3rd round guys and later, it's so low. It's really a low percentage you are going to hit. And I mean, Puka's like a one of one. We're probably not going to see that, for a long time.
Yeah. I totally agree. I do think some of these thirds will hit, but it's like, I don't know. I maybe like 3 guys left on my board, to be honest with you. And after that, like the guys are all UDFAs to me. But you could also claim this is the view of a man with no picks, waiting for the 5th round on the bidding the day after. We have 2.5 minutes left, John. I wanted to make sure I left some time here to thank you for joining the pod. It's been great to have you. Looking forward to having you as one of the big dogs this season. And I'm going big dog hunting this year. I'm maybe not a top 2 team, but I think I'm firmly in that 3-4 area. And we're gonna be looking to knock you and Jim off your pedestal.
Yep, no, you'll compete. I'll give you the go C's Celtics comp where I feel like you can kind of sleep and possibly wake up in the semifinals, and then we'll see where the chips land in that position. But yeah, no,
Don't
it's going to
compare
be a competitive. No, no, go ahead.
don't compare me to the Celtics.
Well, there's several green teamers here who like the comp, but
I got
yeah,
the
no, it's
green
going to be a
headphones.
competitive season. Yeah, I know my division's going to be a bloodbath, and yours is still going to be. Someone's going to emerge from the middle of the pack, and we'll see if anyone puts some chips in it towards the trade deadline this year to really at least try and make a playoff run. Because once you're in there, who knows what happens?
Yeah. And honestly, to everyone else in the league, I know we took some pot shots, but it's all in good fun. Like we
Oh,
love everyone in the league. This is such a fun league. It's
yeah,
so
best league.
enjoyable. I love that everyone has their own strategy and their own like sort of like way they view things, and that's what makes the league great. So we appreciate it. Appreciate you hanging with the punches, and we'll try to do this more often. And looking forward to Saturday. Looking forward to hosting you guys. And Ben, me, and John B will be floating in the pool, just keeping an eye on where the draft ends up.
Well, I won't be, unfortunately, but yeah, it sounds like the
That's
pants will
true.
be
Yeah.
coming off for some of you guys who are attending. So sounds like it's going to be a wild time.
Yeah, sure will be. Well, John, I'll give you a call right after this, but thanks for joining and appreciate you on the pod. And
Yeah,
until next
absolutely.
time, thank you to all the listeners. We'll see you next time on the Old Board Podcast. Until then, we'll see you later.